But I wanted to go briefly over some things I discovered from doing diagrams, because I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago, but I found it really valuable.
Cool.
And I thought I ended up seeing the value of it a lot more after I did it. I thought it would be a cool exercise, but then I started seeing in the diagrams what I liked about the games or what I didn't like about the games.
I will tell you, once you start doing it, you say, wow, where have I been? Where has this been all my life? So it's true for me anyway. Yeah.
The 3 games I diagrammed were Golden Sky Stories, Anima Prime, and Werewolf the Apocalypse.
Oh, wow. And what did you find briefly for those? Cool.
So the 2 biggest revelations were in Golden Sky Stories and Werewolf the Apocalypse, being one game that I really liked the mechanics of and didn't think I would give a crap about the setting, and then one where it's like a heartbreaker for me, where I love the setting and never fully enjoyed the game.
Right.
The two big things were that I found in Golden Sky Stories, that there's these really interesting loops in scenes where the dreams that you receive from other players that you end up feeling good about because your friends are giving you admiration for roleplay end up feeding the connections, which then give you more currency in scenes. But all that really can do is allow you to continue to do things that your friends admire, and it builds this weird friendship loop that makes you feel really positive about each other. And I just found it really interesting to see that sort of like a really sort of, it feeds into other things, but it has this really tight loop in scenes that does exactly what you would want it to do. And then Werewolf the Apocalypse, I found it interesting that I don't think a lot of people in diagramming the game would have put like Worm Thrall as a thing, because it's kind of like a lesser mechanic, but it was kind of important to me because it's the only way, at least that I remember, I haven't played the game in 8 years, but it's the only way that I remember that you turn to the worm.
Right.
Other than just sort of deciding through.
Well, those are sort of, you have both of them in an equivalent position, quite rightly. The more frenzy you descend into is one way to go.
Yeah. Turning
to the worm is the other way to go.
Yeah.
One thing I noticed in the werewolf diagram is no looping.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one thing that I noticed too. And it also, it sort of helped to clarify precisely why I wanted to make Kinfolk, because Worm Thrall is, I don't know if they maybe changed it in the 20th anniversary edition, but as I recall it, it was just you get a certain amount of successes on a rage roll, and then suddenly you're like sexually assaulting people and ripping their guts out.
Right.
And it completely destroyed for me. I mean, it's this sort of like gamble, but there's no real gamble because you can't choose how many rage dice to roll.
Right.
You just roll your rage.
Right.
There's no choice. There's no choice to becoming evil. There's just like, well, I was a rune and I rolled too many dice and now I'm eating babies.
Right.
So.
Right.
Kind of going back through the system and trying to diagram it helped me to realize kind of why it always sort of struck me as a little hollow, and why I feel like everyone I've ever played with has kind of ignored the frenzy rules.
Right. Right. Well, the idea being that there you are doing what you have to do, which is to make resolution rolls. You just do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, you're stuck. You're going to be playing the game. You're going to be making resolution rolls. And then all of a sudden you find yourself in positions that really don't seem very emergent from which decisions you made.
Right.
So, yeah, I see what you mean. I was kind of curious about renown and stuff at the far right of the diagram. How do those feed back at all?
They allow you to, so XP feeds back into buying more rage gnosis and willpower, which can help in resolution. I didn't include gifts because they operate so differently from gift to gift. It didn't seem
okay.
Some gifts would definitely feed into resolution though. But yeah, renown just gives you enough of itself to rank up.
Right. So what happens basically is that what you've drawn is each iteration of how big you are.
Yeah.
And so then you look at how much renown you get, and you're like, okay, now it's the same diagram, right? Each time you go up, it's just bigger.
Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't ever seem to feed back into any mechanic that actually feeds
Right.
the theme or the promise of the game.
I agree. I agree. So we have, so good. I'm really glad about those. I'm glad the diagrams are useful, and I encourage them for love and fun. You know, not as a chore, but for love and fun as you play games as you go on. As I have stated many times, one of the most important things about them is that the variables that pertain to a different game, to a given game, may be very different from those that show up on the diagram of another. So they're definitely not the same principle applied to different games. You know, you don't all, like you pointed out in one of the diagrams I did, resolution was just black boxed in a particular spot and not a very important thing. Whereas in another game, it's pulled apart into many portions.
Right.